What is up? We are up and running with our inaugural episode to the Certified Amateurs podcast. You'll notice that we're not going to burden you with a list of sponsors because we currently have no one interested in sponsoring us. Trust us, we checked. It was a few humbling phone calls. If you like the podcast, be sure to tell people about it and give us a shout out. We appreciate the help. The Certified Amateurs podcast is hosted by three guys who are not truly experts in any one single field, but we try to tackle a large number of different topics. It is true that we are not professionals or experts in any given field, but we have the experiences, knowledge, and research ability to bring you an interesting and insightful position on a bountiful bevy of dope shit. Today, our topic of choice is the use of PEDs in sports. Are they ethical? Should they be used? And if so, in what capacity? For those of you listening who are unaware of what PEDs are, it stands for Performance Enhancing Drugs, and it actually has become a hot button issue in sports. When most people think of PEDs, you think of anabolic steroids, human growth hormones, those kind of things are all PEDs. And in sports, they often get flagged, and it can be an issue in a lot of different professional sports. And the problem with that being is a lot of professional athletes now are actually getting suspended and banned from their pro sport because they're getting flagged with PEDs, and people are outraged, and it's kind of dividing the line, and it's this big argument ensuing over whether they should be allowed or not. So, when talking about this issue, there can be two different sides of the argument. There's the entertainment side and the sport side. So if something is viewed as a sport, for example, the MLB, if you view it as baseball, MMA, if the UFC, if you view it as MMA and view it purely as a sport, then there's certain ethics and values that intrinsically need to be upheld by that sport. You need to worry about sportsmanship. You need to worry about it trickling down to the younger generations, because whether you like it or not, if you're a professional athlete, then people are watching, and people are going to start to try and duplicate and replicate the things you do. However, if you view the industry as an entertainment industry, such as like the UFC, if it's just meant to be entertainment, then the purpose of that entertainment industry should be to produce the most entertaining product they can. A perfect example of this issue is the 1998 baseball season. So, for those of you who weren't around or maybe not big baseball fans, what happened in 1994 was there was a players' strike, and they actually had to cancel the rest of the 1994 season. And it was the first time since the early 1900s, I think it was 1904, where there was no World Series within Major League Baseball, and it was catastrophic to their viewers. A lot of people just decided to give up watching baseball. However, in 1998, people started cracking home runs. So there was 13 players with over 40 home runs in a single season. And to put that in perspective, the single season record at the time was set by Roger Maris in 1961 with 61 home runs in a single season. So to have 13 players with over 40 home runs is pretty impressive. Not to mention, you had the home run race between Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa. And both of these individuals ended up breaking Roger Maris's record, with Sammy Sosa hitting 66 home runs that year and Mark McGwire cracking 70 home runs that year. And this brought a ton of viewers back to baseball. Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire were named Sports Illustrated Sportsman of the Year. But 8 of the 13 players that hit over 40 home runs that season, including Sosa and McGwire, were flagged for the use of PEDs and kind of blacklisted by the Hall of Fame. Now, herein lies the problem, because do you define this as an entertainment thing and say this is great, it produced a great product, people were more interested in watching baseball, it brought a lot of viewers back to baseball, or do you view it as a sport and argue that they never should have even taken the PEDs. They never should have had that, and it's wrong that they should have taken it. So what are your guys' thoughts on the issue?
Yeah, so probably about a couple weeks ago, I talked about this with you earlier, and I was definitely a big fan of allowing performance enhancing drugs in sports, just purely out of whatever the athlete wants to do, and I guess it correlates with entertainment value too, because you'll get the best product of the athlete. But recently I've been looking into it, and I don't know. I kind of changed my opinion on it. I don't think they should be allowed, and I just definitely looked back on it and saw that it's really dangerous for everyone in hand, especially for the athletes. And I know we shouldn't, as the fans, we definitely, we're kind of in the sense where, oh yeah, we don't care, it's their bodies, whatever. But there's still human beings out there too. At the end of the day, and we just gotta, kind of reflect on that. Plus, I know Noel competes as a power lifter as well, and for people that even if it is capable, which he's capable of doing it, morally he thinks, no, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, that's 100% my choice. I just personally don't want to get involved with PEDs. It's just not my thing. I've been offered them in my own gym at times. Most of my good friends who are high-level powerlifters are on performance-enhancing drugs, and I don't frown upon that. What you were saying earlier, it's their body, their choice. But at the same time, my only problem with that is when you take someone, whether it's in powerlifting or whatever sport, and they're on PEDs, and it's not known. Powerlifters, they will get drug tested, and there are ways to cheat drug tests, such as taking short steroid cycles or just getting the steroids out of your system by the time you are going to be drug tested, or and there are plenty of methods that I've heard of. I've never personally went through any of them, obviously, but that grinds my gears. I don't understand why, when there are divisions where you don't have to get drug tested, drug free or whatever you want to call it, and they enter in the drug tested divisions, why they'll know they are on drugs and compete against the majority of people who aren't on steroids. And when it comes to that, I just feel like that's taking advantage. Obviously, there are rare cases where someone's taking performance enhancement drugs and they're still weaker than others, or worse athletes, or whatever you want to say. And in that case, obviously they're probably better off just not taking them at all. But when someone wants to cheat their way through something or cheat their way through a title or something like that, that's when I have an issue.
My big issue is just when it comes to the safety of people, because if you think about it, I don't know if all of our people listening right now, I mean, if they watch the UFC, they watch Francis Ngannou just knock out Alistair Overeem, just completely murdered him, made him look like a rock'em sock'em robot with one punch. Supposedly, I heard I was listening to a podcast, and this might be I'm not exactly 100% positive, but I heard might have been Brendan Schwab or Schaub. I said Schwab was saying that guy doesn't even take proteins, like protein powders or anything like that, just because he's so afraid to piss hot, like when it comes to those things. But I mean, if a guy like him, though, if you can imagine someone like him, as much of a genetic freak as he was, because I think he was homeless 6 years ago. Now he's fighting for a title. I think around the end of this year, I think in December, right? December 30th, maybe. Mm-hmm. He's fighting for
220 against 220.
Yeah, against Stipe Miocic.
Yeah. That's in, I believe it's in January.
Yeah, I misspoke. But you know what I'm saying? Him as a genetic freak as he is, if you gave him that extra edge of taking steroids or anything like that, he'd probably kill somebody with one of those punches. As hard as he hits now, without it, just completely clean, just training all natural. If he starts taking something like that, he could definitely do some serious damage to someone.
Bring up a very good point. That is something to definitely have a concern about when it comes to combat sports, because obviously that's a whole nother game, as opposed to someone cracking home runs, cracking a skull open is a completely different story.
So, Noel, personally, I know you powerlift a lot. I know that just as a stigma, whether it's true or not, I know a lot of people just would assume that most powerlifters are on some form of PEDs, whether steroid or human growth hormone. And I know that you've told me personally that for you when you powerlift, it's more you competing against yourself, so what everyone else does is irrelevant. But I do also know there's the viewpoint of to be someone that is like a world record holder in bench press or squat, it would almost be impossible to compete at that level without taking some form of PEDs. So do you think, because I know you mentioned the safety aspect in combat sports, so for those of you who don't know combat sports with wrestling, jiu-jitsu, boxing, MMA, those combat sports where it would be maybe unsafe, but would you say it would be fine in other sports like baseball or powerlifting or any of the other sports where maybe you're not intending to harm someone?
Yeah, can I add in on that real quick? Also with those world records and stuff like that, I know, for instance, Barry Bonds' home run record, I know it has an asterisk beside it, because he tested positive. would that also go with powerlifting records as well? Like for those guys, does it have a kind of an asterisk or kind of a negative look to it? When that people obviously know these guys are juicing and have an unfair advantage over someone that is competing completely clean.
Yeah, so with there being drug tested divisions and non drug tested divisions, that's how the records are. It'll say non drug tested, which most people are obviously going to assume, well, that means that they're on steroids. And then drug tested, it'll assume, oh, they're not on steroids. But like I said earlier, that's not always the case, which is why I don't understand why someone would intentionally be on steroids and enter a drug tested division. Because if there's a undrug tested one, like, just let it be known. Why are you embarrassed? Like, just be honest about it. My favorite powerlifter in the world right now is both the world record holder at 242 pounds and 275 pounds, Larry Williams. He is 22 years old and has admitted that he's been taking steroids since he was 18. And I mean, the man's a monster. He squats almost 900 pounds, bench presses 630 pounds, and I believe deadlifts almost 900 pounds as well. And, obviously when you hear numbers like that, you do not think most people can do that without the use of steroids. And he's very open about it, and I respect that 100%. The only people that I don't really respect are obviously the ones who keep it a secret. But what Jonah was saying earlier when it comes to whether I would be more accepting of PEDs in like a sport of powerlifting as opposed to MMA, it's kind of hard for me to give an answer to that. But like we were talking about earlier, the way that Mike put it into perspective, like someone who's as lethal as one of the top fighters in the UFC goes ahead and, takes performance enhancing drugs, who knows how dangerous they could be. Well, as opposed to powerlifting, I mean, there's no contact. Like it's the person versus the weights, nothing bad's going to happen to anyone else or anything like that. So that's, yeah, I would say that I'm more open to it in other sports, some sports compared to others. I rather see it in sports that wouldn't involve other people getting hurt. That would be for sure. And then also, like I was saying, in powerlifting, there are untested divisions. In the UFC, you don't have a choice. You are getting tested. So you should make, obviously, the choice to not be on steroids. Because that you sign that in your contract. You say, I will not take PEDs.
Okay, and I want to bring up the point of that. So I think there's a misunderstanding in a lot of sports when they hear drug testing, they assume it's PEDs. Well, that's technically false. It's actually a list when they sign a contract known as a banned substance list. And some of these big organizations doing that are the WADA, which is the World Anti-Doping Agency, or USADA,
The Golden Snitch.
the Golden Snitch, and some of those rules on those are actually completely ridiculous. So I think there is some sort of gray area. I don't really think it's a black and white area because these banned substances lists are bonkers. I read it actually, and it's actually a 9-page phone book of everything being over 7 syllables and including at least 2 X's and completely uninterpretable without the use of Google. This stuff is mostly stuff you've never heard of, but a lot of the banned substances on the list are something that any of us could go to a Walmart and pick up. So there's stuff like pseudoephedrine is on there with it. So if someone takes a flu medicine within a certain amount of time of being tested. And for a lot of these organizations, the testing is random. So it's not like, well, Friday at 9, you're going to be tested. So be ready. It's, they could show up at 4 in the morning. And those are like a urine-based test and a blood test. So some of this stuff is just absolutely ridiculous. Levmethamphetamine is another one, and that's found in a lot of nasal decongestions. So, I mean, this is some of the stuff on these lists are not steroids. They're not human growth hormones. They're stuff you can get at a GNC or Walmart. And I know Mike mentioned earlier the fact that Francis Ngannou won't even take protein shakes. It's because they're worried about tainted substances. So if a company makes things with one of these banned substances list, it could somehow, in a small degree, get mixed up in something that is allowed. So you could be drinking a protein shake and it's mixed with something that's on this banned substances list, and all of a sudden you pee hot for taking a protein shake. So I think there is a gray area. I think that these banned substances lists have got to be greatly revised, and a lot of the stuff should be allowed, because if you're an athlete, why do you have to bring a 9-page document with you to freaking Walmart to pick out some cold medicine? It's just ridiculous.
Very true. That's why we were talking about it the other day. A lot of powerlifters and even just athletes in general would get busted because of substances in their pre-workout. And that's just another thing, especially if you're a powerlifter. Most guys are taking pre-workouts before their training sessions, and they would go take a drug test, assume they're perfectly fine, and then piss hot because of substances in their pre-workout. And I agree with you that list is complete BS. I mean, marijuana just got taken off. It's 2017, for Christ's sake. If an athlete wants to smoke weed, let him smoke weed. If anything, that's just a personal choice. I'm surprised alcohol isn't on there. Like, geez,
It is
that's
on
a little.
there. It's on.
Dumb.
Alcohol is on there for flight and automobile
Wow.
sports, which I mean is just obvious.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, obviously. I didn't realize. Is it like split? Is the list split between sports, or are certain substances only for certain sports, or?
Yeah, there are. So basically, a lot of them are actually split within and out of competition too. But a lot of the sports specific ones are really like a lot of it's more specific to like the driving ones. So things like, obviously alcohol and everything. Like if you're flying a plane, they don't want you hammered. So a lot of it is sport, but there is different stuff within competition, out of competition, like glucocorticoid excuse me, glucocorticoids. It depends on where you're injected too. Like if you're in competition, you can't have it injected directly into a tendon. Or there is something, I think, to me the most ridiculous part of these banned substances list are something known as a therapeutic use exemption form. And this is when something that you medically need to take will cause you to fail a drug test if you're tested. So you have to fill out paperwork in order to take medicine you need to survive. This is like stuff like asthma medication. I think there's some diabetes medication on there, and like the fact that that is even a substance involved that could cause you to lose your source of income is just absolutely ridiculous. Yeah.
I wonder if like Chad Mendez even like, because like he doesn't have. Let's be honest, he's not making as much as someone like LeBron, so he doesn't have someone like the highest of highest nutritionists. Like, hey, don't worry about this. Like, I'll take care of your paperwork. Like, you don't need to worry. You just take all this stuff. I'll handle the legal stuff. He probably has to do a lot of that on his own. And he might have some sort of a legal team, but it's not like Chad Mendez is that guy's number one priority. He might be facing other cases and stuff he's handling.
I mean, you can even go because Chad Mendez is huge. Like even and I agree with what you're saying, but like there's amateur athletes in the Olympics that are subjected to these substances lists. So like I mean, if you're a freaking bobsledder from somewhere in the Eastern Bloc where everyone just refers to your country as Russia because they don't know the difference, you're probably not having an extremely like qualified nutritionist go into the grocery store with you to pick out your substances, and that could cause you to fail just because you're picking up cold medicine.
Does Olympic medals even mean anything anymore? I feel like they just give those things back. Like it's just kind of like you rent them.
Yeah, Jonah, like you were saying, when athletes are worried about their nutrition or supplements or what have you, that's why a lot of supplements these days, supplement companies are coming out of nowhere because they have on their tags like we are WADA certified, USDA, like drug free, you'll pass a drug test with this, no banned substance free, everything like that. And a lot of those companies are obviously making a ton of money these days because they're the only ones that guarantee that you're not going to fail a drug test if you take their supplements.
There's clearly some stuff that needs to be revised in those lists. So like for those people who are on the side of entertainment, and granted I used to be on that side of the fence, thinking like, all right, let's just see some 800-foot home runs. I want to see, people like, breaking 40 tackles a carry, like whatever, like, so to those people, I would argue that you do, whether you think it is right or not, when you're a professional athlete at the highest level, you do have thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even millions of people watching you at any given point. Is that fair? Probably not, because they're a person just like everyone else and they shouldn't have everything that they do scrutinized. But if you are choosing to take a PED, then that could and likely will trickle down to the lower levels, like high school, college, and to add to what Mike's saying, if you're, a random high school student trying to take steroids to compete at the highest level, maybe you aren't the most naturally gifted and you need to keep up. Smash Williams, Friday Night Lights, perfect example. So,
oh my gosh, the acne was the only thing that gave it away.
Yeah.
Not his increasing his 40 time
by like overnight.
Half a second.
Yeah, he injected one needle into his ass, and the next day he was running a 4.2. But anyway, so I mean, you're not gonna. Yeah. So the next day, I mean, you're not gonna have these drastic changes, but if you do have it over years and years of people taking it, it's gonna trickle down to the lower levels. So Noah, what would you say are the health hazards to someone who is in high school or college, or just someone in general that's not knowledgeable on steroids, PEDs, human growth hormones? So how is that dangerous? So like, if I just decide to take them tomorrow, why is that bad for me?
Oh, well, there are just numerous health concerns when it comes to PEDs, especially like you brought up in high school students or students going through puberty. There's already so much testosterone being built in your body and so many changes that you're going through. Adding another element on top of that is pretty much just going to wreck your health. Common side effects for testosterone are like puberty symptoms, like terrible acne, hair growing in places you don't want it to be. And the biggest concern with steroids over time, like you were saying, is liver health. If you don't have a liver blocker, because like the thing is, you can't just take one PED. If you want to take testosterone, you're going to have to take a liver blocker to keep your liver from falling apart and dying. If you want to keep doing testosterone and keep putting that into your body, you're going to have to take an anti-estrogen, because the testosterone that's being raised also raises your estrogen. And that leads to things like gyno, which is actually prevalent in powerlifting a ton. And it's kind of funny to see guys with man boobs at the gym sometimes try to act tough. But major concerns, some steroids can be used to treat certain diseases or just health hazards in general, such as Anadrol, which is an oral supplement, and it is used to treat anemia and or like muscle wasting, basically when your muscles are just eating each other apart. But for the most part, people are going to take that for mass and strength and fullness, which is why that's also the sport of bodybuilding. Everyone who's a professional bodybuilder is on steroids, unless they're at a natural pro show where they get drug tested randomly, such as Olympic athletes. But when it comes to that, that's basically, bodybuilders go through cutting and bulking phases. Anadrol will help them gain muscle fullness after they, cut down to whatever weight class that they're competing in for bodybuilding. And obviously, just think about that, us as wrestlers, we all know how terrible cutting weight is. Basically, bodybuilders do that a few times a year for extended periods. There are guys who go from a lean, bulky, steroided up 270 pounds down to their 190 weight class like 3 times a year.
I think with the weight thing too, it just brought up this point I actually looked up. There's this guy, Enzar Boltakayev. I don't know if you guys remember him or not, but he beat Kyle Snyder and Jake Varner at I think it was the year Regan in 2016, and this guy was obviously juicing like just thicker than a Snicker. I mean, he looked just like Brock Lesnar, just with a Russian face. And
did he have the
no disrespect to Russians, but
did he have the crew cut too, or
it was just he was the Aryan race, just blonde hair, blue eyes, like just he was Hitler's dream child.
He's just Ivan Drago's wife.
Exactly. But this guy, I mean, he was just massive. I mean, he wrestled 97 kilos, and he might have, and that's like 213 pounds, for us, not in the metric system, but he probably weighed that for all of 4 seconds. Let's be honest. And just the way he competed, I mean, this guy was doing backflips in matches, like for takedowns and stuff. I mean, it's just, you just see how much of a freak it makes you. And I'm pretty sure, I think he either lost in Russian Nationals or he got like clipped. Like they were just like, you're obviously, like they just knew. I think they hit him with a test or so too. But yeah, I mean, you can definitely see where it definitely works. They don't just take him for fun.
Yeah. So true. And the single biggest attractive quality, I guess you could say, to PEDs is just the recovery. When you're a top level athlete, you're training 3, sometimes 4 times a day, maybe even the highest one's 5. You need to recover, and no matter what steroids you're taking, they're going to help you recover, rejuvenate, help you grow when you're resting, and that obviously leads to more output, which is why I believe besides the added muscle mass and strength, why athletes on steroids can do much more and compete at a much higher level is just because they can train easier and harder and longer, and it and that just leads to them becoming a better athlete overall. And that also is what leads to their high blood pressure, which has killed multiple people who have taken steroids, such as, Rich Piana. I don't know if either of you two have ever heard of him, but he was one of the most popular bodybuilders of all time, and he recently died last year. And, they try to cover up how he died or why he died, but everyone who's educated knows it was because of his extremely high blood pressure from all the Trenbolone that he's taken in his life.
Absolutely. And going back to that point where you said it, just the recovery aspect of it, I definitely think that is a big thing when it comes to sports, especially like skill related sports, say like baseball, golf, stuff like that, where it's definitely not more of like an athletic thing. I don't know how to explain it. It's not more of like physical dominance and stuff like that, but it's just doing that constant repetition stuff like that. I definitely think that extra training you can get, because you got to think, to be like a great hitter in baseball, you definitely have to hit off a live hit, like live pitching. You can't just hit off a machine every single day. So being able to go out there and hit, they might hit like 5 or 6 buckets of balls a day. I mean, that's a lot of torque on your shoulders, your hips, and your back and stuff like that. Especially in golf too. I mean, Tiger Woods is definitely one of his biggest problems is his back issues he's had over these years. So see someone like him taking steroids and stuff like that, his recovery would probably be significantly better if he just was in dabbling in some of that.
So you just go up to a jack dude in the gym who has man tits and is benching 6,000 pounds and ask for some of his best steroids, the cream of his crop, and you just take steroids. Could that kill a person?
Could that kill a person? Yes. Without proper education on how to use, because there are people who have lived their entire life and have no side effects or no high blood pressure, have had any episodes to the point of nearing death or anything like that throughout their entire life. Like, there are guys who've been taking PEDs since they were 18, like Larry Williams, and they're still alive, and they're like 70. So that's not very common, but if you're educated, you know what you're doing, you have other people with you who are going through the same experience, you can live and you can be healthy. Well, I'm using air quotes right now when I say healthy. Um, but I would say, I mean, I don't have a statistic for this, but I would definitely say over 50% of people don't know what the heck they're doing. They just do it because, oh, I know that steroids will make me bigger and stronger and faster, so I will do them. They don't do any research ahead of time. They just do whatever their dealer tells them to do, which is usually you take however many milligrams on a Tuesday or Thursday or a Monday or Friday, usually twice a week, do your injections or whatever, or if you're taking an oral supplement. But like I was saying earlier, when it comes to taking, you can't just take one. You're going to have to take more. And if no one knows that, then they're going to get the side effects. They're going to get the high blood pressure, the gyno, their liver's going to start falling apart, and then the health concerns come in. And at that point, if nothing's done, then yes, they could most definitely die.
I think the interesting thing that you told us the other day was just I had no idea about anything about how you get like steroids, any of those like hard PEDs, like the stuff that like the big athletes or
The good stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Michael's secret stuff that you get out of the water bottles. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But no, I just didn't know. I honestly thought this was like some like black market type of thing. Like I had to go on like the dark web to find. But you said like you can get them locally, just like basically like getting like drugs off the street, basically.
100%.
I
They're
just think
done that way.
So it's just like all the gym movies you see where it's like a guy with a like rusty old duffel bag and just pulls it out, just like a bunch of needles, and he flicks it. You just insert it randomly.
I wish it were exactly like that, but the way it works is just word of mouth, man. Like, guys will openly talk about it. I mean, I openly talk about it all the time because like they don't affect me in any way, shape, or form. But there's literally a guy at my gym who makes the stuff on his own, and people buy from him. And I actually worked out with him one day, and I didn't know. I mean, I thought that he might have been, taking some stuff, but I try to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. And he's just like, hey man, you ever looking for that extra push? And then he gave me a weird handshake and gave me I knew what he was talking about, but I was like, what the hell? Like, what is wrong? It was like, I think when I first said something to me, I was probably 18. So that was just weird. And I was, me, I was like 130 pounds.
You realize that handshake was the initiation into the secret club, right? Like that's the same way to get in the clubhouse after, where he makes his steroids.
It's like to get into the Illuminati, the Masons, the Freemasons.
Do you think that's why someone's outside of my home every day at 7:00?
Most definitely watching you.
Fuck.
It's the chemtrails. That's what it is.
Yeah, it's very easy to get. But Mike, as you were saying, you can go on the dark web or just the internet in general and type steroids.com and something will pop up. There's actually this company called Live Well Pharmaceutical that Larry Williams is sponsored by, and they openly promote that they sell PEDs online, and you can get them. You can use PayPal, come right to your doorstep, start taking steroids.
Hot and ready.
Yep, hot and ready.
Little
just
Caesars,
like Little Caesars.
Yeah, just 5 minutes is all it takes, and you'll be jacked.
Little Caesars probably would put something in their stuffed crust. Like they're hurting right now.
They probably do put stuff in there if you think about it, because their recovery rates on those pizzas, those things sitting there in the hot and ready box are gonna be like 40 hours. Yeah, they're still the same pizza you're eating. I wanted to touch on the whole, I guess, ethical part of it and where that I guess stems from. I was actually just reading an article from Brent Musburger, and if you guys have ever watched ESPN or any college basketball game, any time at all, you'll know Brent Musburger. But he was saying how athletes should be allowed to use steroids, which I thought was really surprising when I first read it, because I was like, there must be some they're leaving out when they're saying like, oh, he's signing off, like, yeah, they should be able to use them. But he's saying that the main issue that they get such a bad name is because of journalism. He said that the journalists are the reason why steroids are given such a bad name, which I think is funny because he's part of the media too as well. So obviously, at some point in time, he must have been against this too, because it's not like he was like this his whole life. It must be. And this came after his retirement too. He was speaking to, I think he was speaking at Marquette, or no, it's Montana, University of Montana, journalism students.
Well, you got to think, man. Like part of that, I don't know necessarily that he changed his mind, but if you're a journalist or something working for a major like corporation or whatever, like ESPN, you have bosses like everyone else. I mean, like you said, he's coming after that when he's retired and he doesn't have a boss to push it to. So he might have always held that position. I don't know him. I'm not going to speak for him, but he might have always held that position. Just decided to come out now. But I think just in talking to people, I think the biggest proponent for the entertainment aspect is just that. I think a lot of the people that argue for the ethics of it are those people who are either former athletes themselves or really dedicated to the sport, like former commissioners or just journalists who have always reported on the same sport or just really involved in a single sport that want to uphold those ethics. They want to uphold, they don't want people juiced to the gills that just start breaking every record that's been upheld forever. They really want to respect those, and I think it's definitely sports specific too. Like I think baseball is one of the ones that really respects the stats and really respects the history. It's America's pastime. Like for example, just to give you a reference, when I was mentioning Roger Maris earlier, he was the person who set the single season home run record until it was broken 27 years later by Mark McGwire. He was a Yankee. He played for the New York Yankees. He had a great season. He had 61 home runs, and he was booed by Yankees fans because he broke Babe Ruth's record before that of, I believe it was 60. So, I mean, I think it's definitely sports specific in the fan base on what you would say. I think especially the sports that have a very extensive banned substances list like MMA, because as a big UFC fan myself, it's very frustrating to see fighters you really like, have followed for years, to see them get flagged for something, and now you can't watch them fight anymore. But I've talked to people personally who will say like, yeah, they'll even admit like, yeah, if someone in baseball takes steroids and can't play, I get mad at that person for taking steroids. If someone in the UFC gets flagged for steroids, I get pissed because now I can't watch them fight.
Well, think about it. Here's a question for you then. do you think when like the old head people that really care about the stats and stuff like that, do you think when they kind of, I don't want to say pass on, but they kind of start to lose interest in the sports in general, do you think that the steroids and not necessarily only steroids or just performance enhancing drugs will be more welcome to like the newer people that they've experienced the whole like how science is definitely, I mean the stuff that they're giving to these people are just ridiculous what they can do. Do you think like that'll be pushed more once these older people are kind of out of the the importance of sports, I guess, kind of say?
Well, I don't necessarily think it's older people because I definitely don't think it's old people who have that argument. There's younger journalists who are against PEDs just the same as there's old journalists. What I meant by old people is people that have spent years and years dedicated to that sport.
Oh, like
and
a true hardcore fan. Okay.
Yeah, see, like either a hardcore fan or a lot of veterans who are in the. So there's always going to be those people who are going to uphold the true nature of the sport and want to. You can find just as many young guys who are against PEDs as you can old guys. And I think the only thing that might ever bring PEDs around good is really right now, it's basically, I highly doubt, not competing in any professional organization or anywhere close, I highly doubt that people are just up and abandoning PEDs altogether. I'm sure they're taking them. I'm sure it's who can cheat the best. I'm sure people have found a way to get around it somehow. I believe it's getting harder, but I think it's always going to be that way. I mean, you're always going to have somebody in Noel's gym who makes it in his house.
Makes in his bathtub?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're always going to have a way to get around it. So I don't think it'll ever fully be out, if that makes sense.
No, I was just asking, just in your opinion. I mean, I'm obviously on the young guys that think they shouldn't be, so I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong. I just was wondering what you thought on that as well. From the sportsmanship, I know you brought that up earlier. That's obviously very relevant to the athletes that are in it. I mean, you can look back as early as someone like Mark Hunt fighting Brock Lesnar. I mean, he was extremely mad when he found out that they let him fight at UFC 200 when he.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because you got to think. I mean,
It was mid WWE tour. Like they were advertising for Brock Lesnar fighting on pay-per-view while he was getting ready to fight. Like, I mean, come on.
I mean, yeah. I mean, he's in full cycle. I mean, those guys. It's kind of. I don't know exactly the WWE contract structure, but you know. I mean, when you go into that, you know what's going on.
Those guys are all like over 200 pounds, even the smallest guys, and they're all pretty yoked. Yeah. I mean, I figured that out when I was like 8. I don't even.
I mean, look at Ric Flair. I mean, they just shredded.
I mean, hell, I fucking love watching WWE. Oh, dude, that shit rocks my chops, man. Like, and I mean, hey, if they want to be on steroids, go right ahead. John Jones wants to blow coke, go right ahead. I mean,
John Jones.
Brock Lesnar wants to taste the steroids. I mean, that's when you were talking about like certain people, like your favorite fighters. It might be hard to like see
John Jones. John Jones is definitely the poster boy for that argument. Like John Jones.
Oh, 100%. I love John Jones. That shit was hard to do.
John Jones. Well, the reason everyone loves John Jones is because, and this you can go back and read Patton's speech to his Fifth Army. America loves a winner. Like, look at the fact that you have a guy like Daniel Cormier, who is a very nice guy. He's funny. He's probably the best light heavyweight to ever enter the octagon besides John Jones. But people boo that guy at everything, and he's never been flagged for PEDs. He competed for America in the Olympics. He was an NCAA finalist and had to wrestle the greatest folk-style wrestler in American history, Cael Sanderson, in the NCAA finals. But I mean, people were booing him in front of John Jones, and this is after John Jones had the hit and run. It was after John Jones had the cocaine allegations, and it was just preceding John Jones's last and final flag, which he's out for 4 years. So I mean, he's got to be done in the UFC, I would imagine. But people are still way bigger John Jones fans than Daniel Cormier, I would say, as a whole, because John Jones is the baddest dude on the planet.
Well, I think it just also, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think it's just that larger than life feeling you get when you see John Jones, because he's just that freak athlete that if he played in any sport, he can probably be professional. I mean, two of his brothers are in the NFL, for God's sake.
I think his sister's in track too.
She can probably run faster than Usain Bolt. Who knows? Yeah, but it's just that thing where it's like, imagine if you got to see LeBron James do something else other than play basketball. Imagine if he did this other sport. Well, John Jones is that for MMA. It's like he could be an NFL receiver maybe, I mean, we're just hypothetically saying, but he chose to do MMA, so now we get to see this freak athlete. That the thing with Daniel Cormier, when you see him, and for most fans when they see him, it's just like he looks like someone's dad. Like, you know what I'm saying? No disrespect, Daniel Cormier is an animal, pure beast. But when I see him, I can relate more to Daniel Cormier than I can John Jones. I can't do the things that John Jones does. Not a lot of people can. So I think that's why he's definitely liked more by people, because it's just like when you see like someone like Michael Jordan or LeBron James. I mean, these people are dunking balls ridiculously high in the air from God knows where, from half court. But I mean, it's just like you just gravitate towards those people because it's just like they're so larger in life. You know, they're once in a generation people.
So, what do you guys think about in discussing this with people in this topic with others? I think the biggest concern and what people are asking me is the question about the future. So if steroids were allowed in sports, if they just said, you know what, let's make money, let's put some superhuman rhino people out there, and let's see some 800-foot home runs, let's see some, just crazy feats of human ability and strength. What do you think that looks like in the future of sports? Do you think that people will begin to become bored by that, or start to expect seasons where there's 70 home runs every year, and start to have unrealistic expectations for the sports and eventually get bored? Or do you think people will just be in awe? Like, what do you think the reaction is if they were to allow PEDs in sports?
I definitely think it'd be a negative one, because in the sense of you lose the purity of the game, to where it's just, when we look at these people that are, professional athletes, I mean, like I said with Francis Ngannou, I mean, I can't personally relate to it, but, you just see, like, just the warrior in him, like, coming from, you were homeless 6 years ago. I mean, he's a massive guy. So, just thinking of that, I don't know. I'm trying to think of how I could say this. But just I guess the purity of it all, because it definitely gets tainted once you think about it. I mean, even now, like in baseball, when they had there was a lot of home runs this year. I think it was like the most home runs they've had in a single season this year. I mean, when you had like Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton, Mike Trout, that Altuve guy had like 4 or 5 home runs in the World Series. I mean, that's like unheard of. I couldn't tell you if that's ever happened before. I mean, it's just insane. But I've heard, I mean, there's rumors around, I've listened to it. I don't know if it's 100% true, where they're like juicing the balls now, or making them where they're easier to hit, like they carry more when they hit the ball. So, I mean, even that kind of got like a negative backlash towards it. I mean, so I can only imagine if every single person had a significant, power up, I guess you could say, with
cheat code.
Yeah, they're all using the 99 overalls.
Yeah, the triangle, left, right.
Absolutely. But I definitely think it would get a big backlash, because it would lose sports, like you said, it would just lose the purity of it all.
Yeah, I'm actually gonna go with the opposite point of view with that one. If I feel like if it's made known, hey, in these professional sports, we are not testing for PEDs. We're allowing them. If you want to use them, go right ahead. If you don't want to use them, go right ahead. I think, number one, there will be not many, but a few. Because, I mean, are you really going to drop a career where you're making millions? But I think there will be a few people who will go, elitist, that'll quit or stop promoting the sport or whatever, because it's now, as Jonah was saying, like, tainted. But at the same time, just like we were talking about it with some occasions and some people, like, they just do these incredible things, these insane things. Like, you just want to watch them all day. Like, one of I mean, he's not an athlete anymore, but he did try out for the NFL and everything. It's Odell Beckham Jr.'s cousin, Teron Beckham. He is one of the most freak athletes I've ever seen in my entire life. And I mean, granted, I'm 20 years old, but still, how many people do you know can do 2 backflips in a row and then deadlift 700 pounds off the floor? Like, no one in the world can do that.
Wasn't he the guy that did the box jump with, like, it was like maybe like a chest level with like 135 on his back or something like that? Yeah, I mean, he's just a freak, man. Yep. Absolute freak.
Like, yeah, his NFL career didn't pan out, but take someone who's an above average football player, an above average athlete, like really strong, really crazy, someone like him, but maybe with like better football skill, and put them in a game. I don't even know what could be done. I wouldn't even like that. just excites me. I would like to see something like that, and I feel like that would draw a lot of people to it once they start seeing like, oh shit, well this dude just hit 10 home runs in this game. Like it's kind of unfair until the playing field is leveled. If everyone can do it, then a bunch of people are going to do it. Then next thing you know, you got these crazy games, these crazy athletes going at each other, these rivalries that are being created, and all that can be made possible because these guys don't have to worry about getting busted.
Here's my thing. I think with any sort of drug, and this is whether it's illegal, whether it's a PD, whether it's like a narcotic or something, you develop a tolerance to something. That coupled with the fact that there's always going to be those people seeking an extra advantage could be disastrous for the sport if steroids are allowed. Because right now, what PEDs represent are those people who are willing to actively do something that is not allowed in order to gain an advantage. They're willing to take that risk of getting caught, getting suspended, getting fined, whatever, getting fired. They're willing to take that risk in order to get ahead of the next guy. These are the most competitive people in the world. Make no mistake about that. A professional athlete is able to get to that level and train because they are one of the most competitive people in the world. So some of those people will always try to get an advantage. So if steroids, if human growth hormones are allowed, like what is the brainchild of that? Like what are people going to start doing? Are they going to start we're going to start seeing more deaths because of that, because people are taking insane amounts, or is some new drug going to be fostered um, by the guy who sells stuff out of his house at your gym, or what's going on here? Like what's going to be the result of that?
Well, I think I want to go back to Noel's point. Yeah, I want to go back to Noel's point about how he said if everyone knows, then it wouldn't be as big of a shock or things like that. But the thing is, like if you look at baseball now, when you see guys like Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton like smashing these home runs, they automatically get the, and I'm guilty of it too. Like they're probably on steroids, and that comes with a negative. You can hear it in my voice. It's just a negative thing. Like they're probably on steroids, and even if I don't know, and I did know, I'd still be like, well, it doesn't matter because they're on steroids. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And the other thing too, if you did allow it in sports, I think it would all just depend on the sport as well. Because I know even the NFL right now, safety is the biggest issue. With CTE and stuff like that. So if you have those guys out there, jacked up on whatever, pills or injections they can get, they're going to be hitting harder, moving faster, and stuff like that. And I think if they see harder hits and these people getting hurt more often just because these guys are just even more freaky than they are, because even Jonah said, I mean, these guys are top competitors, and they're also just gifted. I mean, nobody in those that's a professional athlete is not gifted.
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah, I mean, just because I inject something doesn't mean make no mistake. If I took steroids and I got to be jacked, I would not be able to hit a 100-mile-an-hour fastball. So don't completely take that away. Don't just say, oh, they're just on steroids. They're very hard workers. They're cutting a little corner.
Yeah, they're just gifted too. It's just that extra edge. It's literally like it's basically a cheat code. I mean, you're good at the game. You're good. I say if you're playing a video game, you're good at the game, but having the cheat code makes it easier. I mean, you can't just put a cheat code in and then just be good at the game. You have to know something about the game before you use it.
Yeah.
So, but like I said, I think it would definitely have a negative impact with viewership as well, because it's like a safety thing. Because like someone like me, especially in MMA, like if I know someone's like on steroids, like juicing, and they're fighting someone that isn't on it, I'm definitely not going to watch the fights. I don't want to see someone get really hurt when they're getting hit and pounded on. I like seeing knockouts just like everybody else does. It's just saying, like, we always attract towards violence. That's just how human beings are. I mean, Max Kellerman on First Take, he always puts up a good thing. If you have Michael Jordan and LeBron James playing one-on-one on some random basketball court, but there's a street fight across the street, more people are going to gravitate towards the fight on the street just because it's a fight. You don't see it that often. It's violence. But at the same time, I mean, coming from someone like contact sport or even a combat sport background, you know how dangerous it can be when someone's getting hit. Especially if you've ever played football, you know how bad it hurts when you get hit. Imagine if that guy was, the size of James Harrison. I mean, that guy's massive. And he's on steroids coming to hit you. You're going to get hurt really bad. And I think that'll definitely tone down on the younger, like how we were saying, this will reflect to the younger generations. Parents will be like, I don't want my kid playing football if they have to take steroids. And they're going to be getting hit harder. I mean, think about that. Well, I don't know. I think this was a great inaugural podcast, and I'm definitely looking forward to doing more with Jonah and Noel, and hopefully the listeners and you guys definitely enjoyed what we've gone through today.
Well, I appreciate y'all listening, and I hope you enjoyed it. And tell someone about it. Don't keep it to yourself. If you enjoyed it, talk about it. Tell your friends.